Hello! In this clip from our Justia webinar, The Secret to Career Transitions That Are Epic, Scott Mason discusses the risks of career transitions and how to navigate and effectively tackle them. If you want to see more Justia videos on law practice and legal marketing, be sure to subscribe to our channel.
So, risk dynamics. Why am I talking to y'all about risk dynamics today? Well, it almost goes without saying, but in a way, nothing can ever go without saying. A key to success in most traditional legal practice areas involves understanding the relationship of risk to the client's preferred outcome. Right, and the preferred outcome might be winning a trial or at least having a favorable settlement, taking an employment action and succeeding, signing a contract or whatever it might be. Any good lawyer, and we start being this way from day one of law school, assesses the issues that impact risk and then find ways to minimize and reduce that risk. So some of the major trainings in law school, including the exams themselves, as well as the job functions and expectations that employers or clients have vis-a-vis attorneys, have a dispositional impact, can create a dispositional impact that is heavily influenced by this relationship that we are trained to have with risk. By dispositional impact, what I mean is that if we are spending, if you're lucky, 8 hours a day, but it's more likely 10, 12, 15, sometimes more hours a day, 6, 7 days a week, thinking about risk and ways to mitigate risk, it impacts who you are inside and the worldview that you can create. And so if that dispositional impact becomes imbued with the risk dynamic that forms the pool that we swim in all the time, then that can make career transition, which is inherently risky, something that is specifically and particularly fraught for attorneys, particularly if it is anything approaching a dramatic career transition. Now, where might be some areas that dispositional resistance to risk play out? Money is the big one, but also things like competence. We can become so used to seeing ourselves as lawyers that we sometimes wonder if we can do anything besides be lawyers. There was a 70-year-old attorney that I spoke to one time who hated his entire life. And he said, I stuck with this through thick and thin because I couldn't imagine myself as anything else. In other words, he didn't feel that he could step into any other role competently. And that can really hurt us when we think about the full spectrum of opportunities that the world presents to attorneys like us. Social prestige. All of us, well, I would say most of us, reap benefits from being an attorney in the social sphere and that people take it seriously. We have gravitas. We have social respect. We have proof by virtue of the fact that we got our JD and then passed the bar, that we have an ability to be players in the world, which is why lawyers are naturally seen as leaders and why lawyers get into politics and other very high profile and respected professions. And then another area where this dispositional impact that limits our ability to see our future can play out can be a visioning. If we only see our futures or our professional outcomes within a highly limited place in which risk is constantly mitigated or non-existent, then, as I referenced a little bit more indirectly earlier, but I'll put more of a nail on the head right now, we cannot envision everything that's possible. And I would argue, and we'll discuss this a little bit more later, that if you are an attorney, in a way, practically everything is possible. So, if you ask yourself the hard question as to whether the very fraught relationship that most attorneys have with risk is impacting how you view yourself professionally and outside of your day-to-day practice, here are some tips that can help you manage it. First and foremost, acknowledge that it is an issue. Nothing can change in anyone's life if they won't acknowledge that the change is necessary. Number 2, surround yourself with people whose relationship to risk is radically different than yours. In other words, if you have people in your network, it might be relatives, it might be clients that you have that, I don't know, maybe are in the BC or the entrepreneurial world, or who are artists, or who are daredevils, anything, who feel differently around risk. Talk to them about it. Think about how they might handle things if they were in your situation. Begin to let other mindsets seep into your own head, and over time, the default grooves of thinking that can keep you settled in an anti-risk attitude when it comes to your career can begin to shift a little bit. Always assess the risk of risk aversion. That might sound a little bit kooky, but when you think about it, it's true. Risk aversion is itself very dangerous. And here's an example. I worked in government for many years, and a lot of attorneys in the government sector loved it because they viewed it as completely stable. No one ever gets fired in government. You're always safe. You will get that paycheck no matter what. You'll have your benefits and your pension, all that sort of stuff. And then one day, suddenly it changes. One day, suddenly budgets are cut, or that a new boss comes in who's determined to drive you out, or any of a number of things. And because of the assumption that based on risk aversion, that risk was something that didn't need to be confronted, those attorneys can end up in a very terrible situation. Think about the risk of risk aversion in advance. And as I've hinted at earlier, whatever got you through law school will get you through whatever you put your mind to do. As lawyers, we are some of the hardest working, smartest, dedicated, driven, deadline sensitive people that there are. We are achievers. And if you are afraid of switching into something else, remember, you already done something that the majority of the population can't even dream of having done. Become a lawyer. All right. So I'm having a little bit of an issue with the slides here. There we go. So how do we do exactly what this person is doing right now on this screen, navigating the tightrope of career transition? Well, let's talk about the 4-step process. I'll summarize it first and we'll go into details. 1, identify and obliterate what is holding you back. Number 2, rewrite that professional scaffolding I mentioned earlier and then begin to build on it. Number 3, unlock your charisma. Number 4, create an actual plan for your professional freedom, including the considerations on it I will discuss in a lot of detail in a few moments. So let's talk about a concept that is of utmost importance to this transition, enough that I put it right up front and first, which is the concept of personal myths. Our personal narratives, particularly as lawyers, as I mentioned during that intro section, drive us to or away from success. We often tell ourselves narratives subconsciously. When they are internalizations of larger social and cultural narratives, they're just like Greek myths or other ancient myths that were really the manifestations of cultural expectations, of cultural norms, of cultural aspirations, of cultural fears. They become mythologized inside of us. They become our personal versions of things like Greek myths. So, pivotal to the arc of your professional life is its relationship to the concept of identity. Being a lawyer is a role. You are not born a lawyer. You will not die a lawyer. And you likely, hopefully, have other things that you do in your life. You might be a parent. You might be a bowler. You might be someone who likes to knit or to read books. All of those things are roles that you play in your life. Too many times people, particularly in overwhelming professions like the law, where there's a lot of work and it takes up a huge amount of time and mental space, confuse their role as lawyers with their entire identity. And evidence of that occurs when people who just meet you ask what you are. Who are you? A lot of times people say, I am an attorney. I am a general counsel. I am a partner at XYZ law firm. Think about what you're saying when you say, I am. You're making a statement about identity. And what that's saying to me is that on some level, you're viewing a role, a temporal thing, as core to who you are. Your identity is much, much more than that. It includes the entire continuity of your life. It includes a whole host of things. And when you define your entire identity by your role, then it becomes next to impossible to see out of it. If your identity is too locked into your current role as a lawyer, or is even simply just a traditional role of what a lawyer can be. In other words, I am a law firm lawyer. I can never work in-house. That's not what a law firm lawyer is. Or I am a general counsel. I can never be an operations head. That's just not what I do. Then you are putting yourself in a position where by creating an identity locked into that, you're not able to begin to see, let alone write a new professional narrative. And if you don't have a professional narrative that takes you into a different place, it ain't going to happen except in the rarest of circumstances. And additionally, if you're not happy with your job or your career, it keeps you bound to that, like Prometheus to the rock, with his liver constantly being eaten by an eagle. So before you move into a career transition, it is imperative that you commit to engaging in a growth mindset. A growth mindset is one in which you are committed to the process of change. It's like being a white belt in martial arts. You're willing to learn everything that you need to, or take whatever steps and shifts that you have inside in order to be able to broaden your identity and make sure that you have a full understanding of what it can be, and then are prepared to take the steps that you're going to need to take in order to write that different narrative. This all sets you up for step one of the process, which is to identify and obliterate those toxic myths that are holding you back. You want to begin by exploring exactly what is making these personal myths toxic. What are the elements of your narrative that are keeping you stuck, or that are keeping you from moving forward? Why haven't you done it already? For instance, is your narrative driven by one of those dispositional impacts that we talked about earlier, driven by fears of losing money or social prestige, or being perceived as a failure, which is, by the way, one that drove me for a long time. Oh, would people think I was a flop as a lawyer if I went and moved into a different professional direction? Or is it perhaps driven by another narrative component that can keep you is stuck in a place that is miserable? For instance, cynicism. Oh, things never get better for me. Or just habit. It's comfortable. Even though I'm miserable, I'm comfortable being miserable, right? All of those things are elements of your narrative that can keep you unhappy. And then look at whether role confusion is forcing you into a career narrative that gets you stuck, like we talked about a few minutes ago. Have you relinquished authorship of your own myth? In other words, are you acting as a character in someone else's story? If the Iliad was about your life, would you be one of the characters in it, or would you be Homer writing the doggone thing? I really recommend that people understand this concept of personal myths and personal narratives and embrace it wholeheartedly, because it gives you the power to say, my narrative so far has been XYZ. Now I'm going to turn it into ABC. I'm going to truly take control of the entire arc of my life. And once you really have that in your mind, then that myth or that narrative that you write for yourself can take you a lot of places. That's what began to give me the courage to step out of law altogether and move into manufacturing, which I knew nothing about. Yet I managed to succeed, and you can too. So are the roles you're playing also aligned with your values? Are you sure you know what your values even are? So again, if the role that you're playing in your personal narrative, or that narrative itself, is not aligned with what you fundamentally believe in, you're going to be unhappy. And you need to make sure that you understand what your values are, not just what the world says your values should be, so that when you make that change, you're ready to be able to feel good that it's going to have that level of alignment. Then, You want to begin to, after you've done that deep multi-level self-reflection that I just discussed, to start to take action. Begin to write down your answers to all of the questions above, and you're going to get all of this stuff in your supplemental material. So you're going to have it right in front of you to begin to doodle with and think on and do this writing. If you don't really know what your values are, I've had clients say to me, Scott, I have no idea what my values are. I've never thought about it before. I urge them to keep a values journal, which is a journal of the decisions that you make that reflect who and what you really are. So, for instance, if you say work-life balance, that's everything for me, but you, every time you have a choice, choose not to honor work-life balance, then maybe work-life balance isn't really what your value system is. Maybe your values aren't what you think they are. And so that's why I say focus on your decisions. Ethics, morals, values, they never occur just as statements. They are actually lived through decisions. And then identify purpose-driven lessons from all of the struggles that you have gone through in your career. In other words, if you have really struggled over and over, feeling frustrated because you feel like you're not helping anyone, or that you're helping a group of people as a lawyer that you are not aligned with, then, really think, okay, this is actually pointing me in a different direction. Maybe my purpose needs to be helping XYZ group of people that I wish I were helping rather than those that I am supporting right now.
Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy it, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos on law practice and legal marketing. See you in our next clip.